Hey, it's Katie Moran. Welcome to the Artistic Spirit podcast. Today I'm here with Heather Hall, who is a 3 times cancer survivor, a PR and marketing pro, keynote speaker, blogger who's advocating for a better world and choosing joy daily. Welcome, Heather.
Thanks. It's so good to see you.
It's good to see you again, too. Can you share a bit about your journey as a 3 time cancer survivor and how it shaped your perspective on life and advocacy?
Absolutely. So I have been a cancer survivor for over 25 years. I was diagnosed with my first cancer when I was 21. I was on the cusp, so close to graduating from college. And I started having knee pain, which really probably didn't seem like that unusual. At least it didn't to me at the time. I used to run all the time. I rode horses. I was showing hunter jumpers. So didn't think twice, a couple times about having some ongoing knee pain off and on. Eventually, I went to a walk-in clinic and they took an x-ray and discovered the tumor. So within less than 2 weeks of that x-ray, I had a biopsy, had been the official diagnosis of osteosarcoma, which is an aggressive form of bone cancer, and I started chemo. So I did 13 months of chemotherapy, had a surgery that replaced my femur and knee with titanium. I did graduate in between chemo treatments on crutches wearing a wig. So I did that, taught myself how to walk again and just went about my life. And then about 5 years later, I felt like a mole looked different. So I went into my dermatologist. They removed it. It turned out to be cancer, melanoma in situ, which means that it was thankfully contained in the mole. And I just, have been followed up. And then about 5 years ago, I went in for my annual screening mammogram. So quick side note, everybody needs to be staying on top of their annual preventative screenings because it saved my life. I went in and the tech thought she saw shadow on my mammogram. So they redid the screening and turned out to be early stage breast cancer. So with that, I had to go through a lumpectomy and chemo and radiation, and I'm still on hormone replacement therapy, which I'll probably be on for another 2 to 3 years. So it's been a journey, lots of ups and downs and lots of beautiful moments in between.
How did it change how you saw the idea of deciding how you want to feel and what attitude you could have and your perspective in the power of decisions?
Yeah, it was I mean, as you can imagine, it was a major impact. I mean, especially to be diagnosed at 21 when you in some ways feel you're invincible, and I had, getting ready to graduate, I had these massive career goals. I wanted to just jump in and change the world. And I think maybe being 21 helped me with a little bit of that attitude though too, just because it was like, okay, I'm young, I can like do this. I've got a whole life ahead of me. I mean, I thankfully always had the attitude that when I get better, when I do this, I just assumed all would be well. And thankfully it was. But it really helped define, like I said, it changes you when you're so young. I mean, being a cancer survivor over 25 years, I have now, thank heavens, been alive longer. But as a cancer survivor, then I was not a cancer survivor. So that has impacted my career goals, my relationships, like my decisions, all of these different things. And I think the beauty of being a cancer survivor at that young age is that I had to face down my mortality much earlier than most people do. I had to learn much earlier than most people do that your health is not a guarantee, that your attitude and everything really do play a difference in that. So having that positive mindset, having the ability to be able to find good and joy and laughter in every day, I mean, really did make a difference. Like, for instance, I was inpatient for chemo during bone cancer, and there would be times that my nurses would come in and they were like, are you doing crunches right now? Are you doing like leg lifts right now? And I was like, yeah, I'm bored. Or, it was just stuff where I would like get on my crutches and, it'd be 10 o'clock at night when most people were sleeping, and I'd hike it down to the nurses station. And I was like, do you have any nail polish or anything like that? I mean, we just kind of made it, I had to, right? Like it
Mhm.
it helped me get through doing that. And then over the years, I developed a mantra, and my mantra was today I choose. And what that became for me was really that every morning when I wake up, I ask myself, what are you choosing today? Because the reality is we all have the power of choice. We can choose to stay in bed. We can choose to be really upset. We can choose to be angry at the situation we're facing. Not to say I have not felt all of those, negative or really heavy emotions, but we can choose that, or we can choose the opposite of it. And so for me, asking myself that question every day that I woke up, that I was in treatment, and even to this day, I still do it. I ask myself, what are you choosing today? And I answer myself, and I'll say, today I'm choosing courage, laughter, excitement, resilience, whatever that may be. And that's my theme for the day. So that when something maybe hard or unexpected pops up in the day, or your day feels like it's, even technology issues, or even something that's seemingly small that throws us off sometimes, that's my guiding force to remind myself, oh, you actually, chose joy today. And right now you're cranky. So this isn't meshing with your theme for the day. So that's kind of how I have been able to manage my mindset.
That's awesome. So what are you choosing today?
Today, I am choosing sunshine to be find laughter and sunshine because it's actually a really dreary, rainy day here in Michigan. And so today, I'm just looking for the light in the whole day and everything I'm putting forth it. And I'm telling myself to be the light today too.
That's so beautiful. I love that. Um, so in terms of self-advocacy, tell me about the role of self-advocacy in coming before you advocate for other people.
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up because I am a passionate advocate for, making the world a better place, for helping other people. But one of the important lessons that I've learned over the years is that I am only as good of an advocate for others if I'm also that equal advocate for myself. Like being your
Mhm.
own advocate is so critical, whether it comes down to your healthcare decisions or relationships or your career choices or all of that, learning how to draw those boundaries so you can be a really, really helpful person and empathetic person and all of those things that make you a great person without draining yourself. We have to kind of tap in and remind ourselves that we have to keep our own reserves really full so that we're able to put that out into the world and to be able to help others. So I often work with people and do workshops and trainings on being a self advocate because what I've seen over the years, particularly from like, let's say a healthcare perspective, so many people will say, oh, my doctor didn't do that. Or my doctor, I was fortunate that I have had in all of my health instances, I've had phenomenal care team, phenomenal. I can't say enough about them, but they're the ones that taught me when I was diagnosed with breast cancer. My breast surgeon, she said to me, one of the most important things I need you to do is you do you. That means that if you want to do something that people don't agree with, I opted for a lumpectomy because that was the most aggressively conservative option. I didn't need a mastectomy, but the number of people who questioned my decision, it wouldn't change my outcome. So, but it was like, well, why? And I'd catch myself starting to explain, and I was like, no, I actually don't need to justify this. I don't need to do this. So I think being a self advocate is knowing your limitations, knowing what your boundaries are, protecting your peace. That's a really big thing for me. Taking care of your own health, doing all of those things that, that brings you the ease, joy, abundance, good health, all of those things. But like I said, I really believe that it's easy to say, oh, we're going to help other people, but then sometimes we have to look in a mirror and ask ourselves, are we really, what are we doing for
Mhm.
ourselves right now?
Mhm. What is your practice to protect your own peace?
Oh, it's been a learned practice over the years, and I will admit sometimes I slip it up. But the biggest thing has been so one of my favorite things I've done, and this sounds kind of easy, but for me, years ago, I started choosing, for instance, a word of the year. And
Mhm.
so that becomes my like grounding reminder, my, kind of compass for what I want for the year, my theme for the year. So over the years, it's been joy, ease, celebrate, choose. This year, I just decided to do abundance. But for instance, last year was ease. And that word became such a game changer for me because anytime a situation would arise, or even I'd make a decision, sometimes even a simple decision to a big decision, I would ask myself, was what I'm choosing bringing me ease? Is what, will this decision bring me ease? Will this reaction bring me ease? maybe, maybe not. So it just became, that was like one way that I kind of practice of like that guiding of what is it? And even though it's a new year, I'm keeping that year because that was probably, or that word, because that was probably the best like example of it. But
Mm.
it's also that power of choice. So I can choose to react. I had a couple doctor's appointments a few weeks ago, and I left one a little bit frazzled. And I remember sitting in my car, taking it. I'm a big believer in the power of breath too. So I took a lot of relaxing breaths, and then I just asked myself, is this reaction really gonna change any outcome? And the
Mm.
answer was no. So instead I just kind of changed my mindset, changed the perspective of it, that even overreacting is not gonna bring me any good. Thankfully, everything turned out
Mm.
okay. But it was
Mm.
just that, sometimes you just have to remind yourself, what is it that I'm going to choose today? What is the reaction that I'm choosing? And what do I want to bring into my life right now?
Yeah, that's so important. And going deeper into the advocacy work, in your advocacy work, how do you aim to inspire others to make a positive impact in the world?
I I'm a big believer that positive change begins with one person. And we can all choose to be the one person. It's almost that like ripple effect in a nice calm lake, right? Like
Mhm.
you throw a pebble in and it ripples out. So if you're choosing that positive, if you're choosing to try to be the positive change, sometimes without even saying anything, you don't realize the inspiration that you're, bringing to other people. You don't realize the motivation that you might be motivating people. I have so many people, I share, I'm really open about what I went through. When I was diagnosed at 21, I made the commitment that when I finished treatment and when I survived, I was going to dedicate my life to making it a better place for other people. I've been involved in cancer advocacy, and I've expanded that out to other forms of advocacy, but I've spoken at, national level. I've gone to DC. I've done all of these things. I've shared my story. So for me, I'm really open about it. And that means like on social media, I'm posting about how people can get involved, why they can get involved, why they should get involved, really easy ways. And I know at times when we say advocacy, people are like, I don't like politics, like go away, don't want to talk about this. But there's a lot more. I mean, the reality is that our voices have major, major impact on the decisions that are being made. And I really think that it is our responsibility to use those voices, to use our voice to help other people, to look beyond, even look beyond ourselves. I mean, the reality is when I'm advocating for cancer, for instance, yes, does it impact me? I know wholeheartedly deep inside my heart that I am alive thanks to advocating for, cancer
Mm.
research, new treatment options, all of that. But the reality is, I didn't do that by myself. I might have
Mm.
gone out and, used my voice, but there was thousands of other people ahead of me, beside me now, and that will be following me. So again, I think that, you have to find a passion, find something that you care about and that you're passionate about, find something that fires you up. Like, just really sometimes even fires you up and like that you're so angry about it, but other times it
Mhm.
just fires you up that you're like, yes, this is my
Mhm.
passion. This is what I want. I want to share this out with the world and really just, focus on that and share your story. I mean, I think our story and the way that we talk about the things we're passionate about can really inspire and motivate people. And I promise you, I could talk about this for days on it. I'm
Well,
passionate about it.
yeah, I do have a question that's related. So in what
Yeah.
ways do you believe creativity can contribute to creating a better world?
I think being creative is, I mean, in many ways, one of the pillars of creating a
Mhm.
better world. It's,
Mhm.
when we're creative, it's helping other people. I mean, it's fine. First, it helps, at least for me. So it helps me find motivation and inspiration and excitement. There are so many times when I'll just stop what I'm doing and I start, I like doing a lot of different things. I scrapbook, I, write, I journal, I do all of these things, but and this might resonate with you and too, is that sometimes when you start doing one thing, it like filters off. I'll be in the middle of something, I'm like, oh, that's actually a good idea too for that thing. Or
Mhm.
it's like I've got this whiteboard in my on my wall that I'm like, oh, that's a good idea. Oh, that's a good idea. So I think that the creativity can really help. And then when you're putting it out there, you do start inspiring and motivating other people. When we were going through COVID and everybody was really stressed out and upset and kind of like feeling blue, I was shortly out of my, third cancer treatment. So for me to suddenly have to be isolated again, I was like, oh, okay. But I chose to kind of channel that, time alone and that extra free time in some ways into different creative things. So I ended up actually launching an online store of motivational products. And so
Mhm.
not everybody has to go as wild as that, but just by me like designing those, affirmation card decks and journals and all of that, I wanted to put all of this, out there because I'd had so many people saying to me like, "Oh, those are cool. Like you made those cards for yourself? Oh, you did this journal for yourself? Like what if could you make me one? Could you do this? Could you do that?
Mhm.
And could you share it with more people? And or could I buy it as a gift?" And I'm like, "Oh, okay." And that was I think one of like the coolest things for me is when I did finally launch these products, the number of people who bought them as gifts. And that honestly, it sounds silly, but in some ways like that wasn't like the initial thing I had thought of when I put
Mhm.
it out there. But I mean, nothing warmed my heart. Like I was so overflowing with like gratitude and joy that people were thinking like, well, I'm going to buy this as a gift and share it with other people. Cause that to me is taking that creativity and just again, throwing it out there and saying, okay, let's make it a better place for everybody.
I love that so much. I'd also love to hear a little bit about the products and kind of like their meaning and purpose and like what makes them important for someone to really transform their mindset and become the kind of person that can advocate for themselves and in the future advocate for other people.
Absolutely, yeah, and thanks for asking about them. The initial card deck I started with it took my mantra of today I choose. And I thought, again, I'm always waking up and I was constantly telling people about this, like, well, this is my mantra. And they're like, oh, I really like that. That's really cool. And then, some of my friends would text later and be like, what's that mantra again? I forgot, and so I thought, and I just kept sharing it and sharing it and sharing it. And then finally a couple of people just said, you should do cards or you should like, put that out there or you should, blog more about it. And I'm like, oh, that's a good idea. And then, like I said, I just happened to be sitting around during COVID. And I thought, I can only work out so much and go on so many walks and all of that. I wanted to
Mhm.
put it together. So the card deck, the Today I Choose card deck, it literally is, I think it's 52 cards. And the idea behind that is it does say that today I choose joy. Today I choose
Mhm.
gratitude. Today I choose friendship. It's a variety of them with different themes. And the idea is that people choose either one a week or one a day or whatever, however often they want to. They're bright, they're colorful, they're meant to be cheery, and they're meant to just be that reminder that if you need that little extra boost or you need that theme for your day or your hour, or your month or week, whatever it might be, they're available to you to remind you that you have the power and that your mindset is really you. You can kind of embrace that and own that. And then the I am affirmation card deck is my newest one. And I am a firm believer in the power of positive
Mhm.
statements. I believe that, we've talked about this, like I'm a lover of words. I'm a communications person. So I believe that words matter. And the
Mhm.
kind words that we say to other people are so important, but the words we say to ourselves are almost more important. And
Mhm.
we so often, I don't know about you, but I catch myself sometimes where I will spread the kindest words to people. And then there's times when I'm brushing my teeth looking at myself and I'm like, ugh, why did you do that? Like, and then I was like, wait, who's this person? I'm supposed to be saying this. So I'm a believer in the I am statements. I think that the I am affirmations are so powerful that they're, positive things that we, reinforce that we say to ourselves. And I'm constantly talking about it. I have 4 nieces and a nephew that I'm always trying to, say to them, they're young and I'm like, you need to like say nice things to yourself, say nice things, talk nice about yourself
Mhm.
or, all of these things. And finally I was like, you know what? I'm going to put it out. I'm so passionate and I believe so much in the fact that like that we should be and we can be kinder to ourselves and that we are all these uniquely beautiful people. So I created the card deck for that same reason, where if you need a reminder, if you need that little positive boost, wake up in the morning and draw a card. And that's, it says,
Mhm.
I'm unique, I am beautiful, I am brave, all of those different affirmations that can really, really help reinforce that mindset.
Yeah, something I really love about that and your product specifically is that you don't have to be in like the best condition to do it, because I think sometimes setting intentions, you need to be in like a positive mindset, and you have to have the energy. And as someone who suffers from PTSD, sometimes I feel paralyzed when I have an episode, and I can't set an intention, and I can't pull that energy, and I can't bring all of that positive energy into kind of like a affirmation myself. And what I love about this is that you don't have to do it all yourself, and that it can be something that supports you, that you might not be able to bring the energy and call upon it, but it's something that is already there and like pre-made, and that like if you can't practice it like without the cards, like it's something that you can do even if you are kind of like at your worst. And I know I've been there before, and
Mhm.
there could be so many different conditions that really
Sure.
take your energy. And something that has always been hard for me is kind of like finding that energy to stay positive and to
Yeah.
be intentional when you feel like you don't have the energy that you think is
Mhm.
required to do it.
No, and I totally agree with you because even, when I was first diagnosed with breast cancer, the first, I think, week or two, I really struggled to get out of bed. I mean, as in,
Mm,
I thankfully am a naturally optimistic, positive person, but like I was just like, no, this sucks. I can't even think of any,
mhm,
nice words to say about this. And I just remember finally, laying in my bed one morning, I was listening to the birds outside and I thought, and that was when it kind of hit me where it was like, okay, what is your mantra, woman? Like, dig deep for that mantra. And at the time, I didn't have the cards. And so I put sticky notes on my mirror just because
mm,
I needed that reminder. And so, and I appreciate you sharing that because like about you, because I also, the idea of those I am cards is that sometimes it's easier to hear things from other people, and so maybe
mm,
those cards can kind of serve
mm,
as that, right? Like you said, if you're not at a place right then, or you're struggling and you can't get that affirmation or intention out, you can flip a card and be like, "Oh, okay.
mhm,
You know what?" Like, I mean, I've even done it. I mean, I use the cards, but I had a friend, say to me recently, she's like, "I love the fact that like I was just having a tough day and I was like, oh,
mhm,
I'm just going to pull a card." And she's like, and I
mhm,
pulled a card and she's like, the card I pulled said, "I am brave." And she's
mhm,
like, and I really needed, it was like you were in the living room with me and I needed to hear that. And it was you saying it. So I was like, I am thrilled that that was my intention of creating them, was again, helping other people be able to, I guess, pretend I'm in the room with you.
mhm. Yeah, I love that. And there's just so many reasons why people might not have that energy, and I just
Mhm.
love how it's like it's not required.
Yeah.
Which I think a lot of like healing strategies or like self-improvement modalities, a lot of them require so much energy and require so much intention. And I don't think a lot of the techniques are really made for people who are struggling the most. And
Mhm.
what I love about it is that even if you are in the place where you don't have the energy to do it, like you could still pull a card, which I think is so beautiful. But I have another question. So,
Yeah.
facing cancer 3 times is an incredible challenge. How did these experiences shape your resilience, and what advice do you have for others going through tough times?
Oh, being going through these in like at different ages, I mean,
Mm,
certainly like were impactful. It's, it really shaped just the resilience of the fact that I never lost sight of the fact that I love my life. Like,
mm,
just even with all the challenges, if all of that, I've been married and divorced and I've, gone through different career things. My dad died from cancer years ago. Watching him go through all of that. I have other family members who are cancer survivors. So, I mean, it's all similar to other people. The reality is that we all have some story of overcoming a challenge. They just might
mhm,
look different. And
mhm,
none of them, I have so many people who are like, oh, I didn't have to go through 3 cancers. I was like, we're not going to minimize what you've been through though, because,
mhm,
at that moment in your life, it was so impactful. So one of the biggest things I remind myself is that to give myself grace and to give myself kindness and ease, to really find like, even if it's 5 minutes of ease in a day, even if it's just sitting down and just taking a breath. I mean, sometimes it's just literally sitting and staring out the window and watching like a squirrel play, just because I'm like, okay, it's bringing me down, and that's kind of helping me. The other thing is that kind of goes back to that choice, is that there's always the, choose again, right?
Mhm.
So when I'm feeling stressed out or anything, I kind of go back to that, what am I going to choose right now? And sometimes I have to ask myself that, you know, 20 times in 5 minutes or in 60
Mhm.
seconds or whatever it might be, but just kind of reminding myself that, this is the here and now. And then sometimes it's also just as simple as, I'm sure you've seen the strategy, but my biggest thing is my home place is always putting like my hand on my heart and like
Mhm.
closing my eyes and listening to that beat, because as somebody who's fought for her life, many, many times, that is like the reminder that I'm here. Like when I feel that heartbeat, there's something inside of it that just like eases everything, where I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm alive. I love every single minute of every
Mhm.
day that I'm alive. I'm so, so blessed to be alive. And I don't, sometimes I feel a little bit overwhelmed, to be honest with you, as silly as that might sound, but I'm like overwhelmed with gratitude at just being alive. And so that's kind of what I center myself on.
Yeah, I can really relate to that overwhelming gratitude for being alive because I used to be suicidal in college. I had a really tough time with a sexual assault and just feeling utterly worthless. And
Yeah.
I really didn't have like the will to survive. And I had like 8 suicide attempts in the span of 3 years. And hearing someone say that they loved their life, like that, it's just so impactful for me because I think about like how much pain like living was for me at like a specific time in my life. And just that I wish there were more podcasts back when I back when I was
Yeah.
suffering that
Right.
or just more people on social media advocating. That's what I really think it's so important for people who have been through things and got through it, like how important it is to share that message and share that story because it really can make a difference in someone's life. And something that I think you're touching on is this idea that we can't always change our circumstances, but we can change the way we talk to ourselves. And it was very hard for me to try to fight for my life, but I felt like what I was trying to fight for was this idea that I was worthy of being alive.
Mhm.
And it was just something that was really hard for me to kind of like see my own worth and to realize that there was life beyond what I was in and beyond my circumstance. And just realizing now I can see that I can change the way I talk about myself to myself, and that even if I'm going through something, I can still choose to be kind to myself, and that I don't have to be my enemy, or that I don't have to believe the things people say to me, or that I don't deserve the way people treat me when it's like negative or treat me like I'm worthless. It's so important that I think no matter what anyone is going through, and I think there's so many similarities here with things we've been through, and
Yeah.
and the way we've seen things, even though I feel like it's almost the opposite, like kind of like really had that fortitude that your life was worth living, and I really questioned it. And I think it's just a very powerful moment for those two mindsets to come together because
Yeah.
honestly, people could be listening in both situations,
Mhm.
which is, I think, something that's so extraordinary about technology, that people can listen to someone who might go through exactly what they go through, and I think that's so powerful. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about this idea of advocacy. And when you were going through what you went through, did you have a sense of a deeper purpose and that you would help other people through it, or did that come naturally later on?
Um, yes, but first, thank you for sharing what you shared. I appreciate that. And I agree with you that we, can come from different circumstances. And one of the things I will be upfront that, like, as positive as I am, I have done a lot of counseling, I've done a lot of support
Mhm.
groups, I've done a lot of that. And I think that technology is beautiful in that way because I've done a lot of, like I said, virtual support groups. But one of the things is, and even when it comes down to the advocacy, is I had a phenomenal counselor say to me one time, because I was like beating myself up over side effects I was dealing with. And,
Mm,
breast cancer is a horrid disease. They all are, but it, impacts women in so many different ways. And I was, going on about like, well, who's ever going to want to date me? Who's going to want to do this? And who's going to want to do this? And I remember she finally, said to me, is this even yours? Are these even like your, insecurities, or are they just, compiling on
mm,
like all of the stereotypes or all of the things that go on with these type of situations, and everything. I'm kind of like, I'm not really explaining it as well as she did, but it just really like reminded me to like, when I'm hearing these things and I'm saying these, terrible things to myself, or I'm feeling like really, really low,
mm,
um, you know, what is, as I'm like, is it kind of compounding with everybody else's, like, what they feel around all of these things too, and how can I find that? But yeah, so when you were talking though about asking about advocacy, so my major thing, so when I was in college, I actually wanted to possibly go into legislative politics and all of that. Not anymore. It was way different back then in
mhm,
politics. I mean, it wasn't always nice. But one of the things that really I think motivated and was like my launch pad was my diagnosis. First of all, I mean, as a 25 years ago, as a young adult cancer survivor, there was very, very few resources for that age range. And in fact, I was treated in pediatrics, which was fantastic at the time because my nurses, like, I just love them dearly and everything. But there was just such a lack of attention. So, for instance, fertility preservation was not a advocate. I was unable to have children because didn't think to save my eggs, didn't think to like do different things. Now that's much more like people talk about it. It's still not
mm,
perfect. But anyway, then when my dad was diagnosed, he was diagnosed with late stage multiple myeloma, which is a cancer of the bone marrow. He was given 3 months to live. My mom and dad basically were like, that's unacceptable. We found a different doctor who specialized in his cancer. She's like, I don't know how much time I can give you, but it's more than 3 months. So he lived 6 years.
mm,
And a lot of the reason that he lived was because we had a new treatment available. There was research and new drug options gave him when he would relapse. We had a drug that would put him back in remission. When he relapsed, we had another drug. And eventually we didn't have any more drugs. And so they've come so far in that, in multiple myeloma research and all that since then. But that was a big thing for me, just to say, like, here's all these gaps in cares, and here's all these, and I have, I thankfully had a mom who was an advocate for my dad and I. So we had insurance, we had all of these. And over the years, I've really come to understand and like kind of made it my passion to understand it all, that, we're not all treated equally. We're not all, where you live impacts all, like some of the care you get and all of that. And so for me, it just became this passion that I was so blessed and so fortunate to have the care team that I did and have all of that. But I would go to conferences, I went to a couple of young adult survivor conferences, and people were like, oh yeah, I don't know what drugs I had. And I'm like, how do you not have a care plan? Because I was like, what are you talking about? My doctors basically gave me this binder of everything. And they were like, what are you talking about? Like, that just not. So it just made me start realizing that I'm like, this, I really think is my, this is like my path. This is,
mm,
I have a power and a voice, which I'll be upfront with you. It's sometimes I laugh, and I think sometimes people who knew me growing up laugh that they're like, oh my God, you're like talking to like, our US senators and all that. Cause I was the shyest child you've ever met in your life. Like, if you talk to me, I'd blush and turn away and run the other way. So, but I just finally was like, you know what? Like, I have this power, I have this voice. And sometimes we think like, well, we're only one person. So what is the impact that we're going to make? And the reality is, like I said before, I mean, if one person can start using their voice, more people are going to start listening to it. And it is pretty fascinating. I'll post stuff on Facebook about stuff, and just to say, hey, we need to be aware of this. Hey, you should be aware of that. And I'll get private messages, or like when I share stuff on my blog, I'll even say, here's how, you can use like your voice for good. And I'll get private messages from people who are saying, oh my God, thank you for I didn't even know this was going on. What can I do to
mm,
get involved? Or what can I do? And I've volunteered with so many advocacy organizations organizations or just worked in like a consulting aspect area with them over the years. And we've shut down phone lines at like, US senator offices because we've said to people, pick up the phone and call and tell them that we have to like, care about other people. We have to do this.
Mhm.
So it comes back to like using your story because people react and respond to humanity. Even,
Mhm.
as wild as the world is right now, people still react to stories and kindness and, you know, kind of like you kind of said earlier, it just they resonate. Your story resonates with
Mhm.
people. My story resonates with
Mhm.
people. So it's letting people know that they're not alone, that they have the ability to, get out there and make an impact with others.
Yeah, talking about your blog, what exactly is your writing process? And do you ever find that it takes more courage to talk about topics that are personal or that are heavier? How do you find the courage to talk about the deeper issues?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that it takes courage. For as open as I am about my story, there are certain topics that it takes courage. I wrote a blog a couple months ago about grief. My dad has been gone 19 years, and I cried buckets writing that blog post just
Mhm.
because and I felt it was a really powerful post. I wanted to write it because so many of my friends had been going through grief, and so many, would ask me, well, how do you handle this? How do you, and grief isn't just about somebody dying, right? It was the
Mhm.
fact like when I found out I couldn't have children, that was a really big, punch in the gut.
Mhm.
And that was grief. I had to mourn it. It was I said to my counselor a couple months ago, I think I'm dealing with PTSD from my last cancer treatment. I think between,
Mhm.
COVID hitting and then all of these things hitting, I recognized that I hadn't really allowed myself, or maybe I just didn't even realize I needed to do it, but to take the time to feel that grief and everything that
Mhm.
I had been through. And so my writing process, it kind of, I've my blog started out quite honestly years ago as something just for me. Like I like to write and it was a release for me. I mean, I do PR and marketing, in a professional capacity, but I can't always write how I want to write. So it became topics of that. And then I started getting such positive feedback from it. I mean, I was just kind of randomly sharing it. And what I realized is that I wanted a lot of the theme for that one is living beyond cancer. And it's kind of expanded even more so that I have to like over half of my reader or subscribers aren't even cancer survivors because the idea of what I wanted to do with it is that when I talk about living beyond cancer, it's like no matter where you are in your journey, we've all been
Mhm.
impacted. You could be a caregiver, you could be a family member, you could be anybody. But it's just that goes back to that like finding ways in the day, no matter what you're facing, to appreciate life, to love life, to find something good in that. So a lot of, my blogs, I of course try to have like something helpful in each of them, but it's interesting because over the years people have said like, oh, well, you could hire a ghostwriter or you could use AI or you could do this. And I struggle with that, which quite honestly, it would probably save me so much time to do it, but I struggle with it because I want to put a piece of myself in every post that I do. I
Mhm.
want to share. One, I think that's what helps resonate with people. When I went through breast cancer, I cold capped to save my hair. So you literally put this like frozen hat, like, cap on you to save your hair. It shuts your hair follicles and tries to prevent your hair from falling out from chemo. So I wrote a lot about that. I documented my whole experience. I documented the trauma of, staring. I said to somebody the other day, I still to this day, when I like comb my hair out and I see hair coming out, it like I have to catch myself to be like, okay, we're not losing our hair. Calm down. Everybody loses a couple strands a day.
Mhm.
So it's just stuff like that. So when I'm writing, I want to be able to put in the I could probably I don't focus as much as like all of the official, bloggers will say like you need to do this, you need to do this. For me, it's just what do I want to write? What is a topic that I have found to be really valuable? What are my friends talking about that they need help with? And what can I put out there for them?
Yeah, going deeper on that, how do you feel storytelling can either change someone's perspective, bring people together, or be a powerful tool for advocacy.
I think storytelling is the most important thing because
Mhm,
it puts a face on the different issues that we're discussing.
mhm,
So we can be talking about, cancer treatment, for instance, or, unhealthy relationships or whatever. But when you put a person to that, when you put a face to it, when you put a real life story behind it, it turns it into something that people can relate to. And I really think that part of being an advocate or using the advocacy is finding it relatable. How can you see people included in it? And I've always said to people, going back again to cancer advocacy, I'm like, you don't have to be a cancer survivor to care about this stuff. You don't have to be, somebody who's going through a bad relationship to care about this stuff. You don't have to be, I'm not a parent, but that doesn't mean I don't care about the issues facing children and all
mhm,
of that. But I also think that when you're putting stories, especially when you're doing advocacy related to like legislative work, because it's one thing to walk in there and say to your representative, hey, we need you to, approve, we want your support for 600 million in cancer research. And they're like, sure, sure. But when you go in there and you're saying, hey, look, I want to first thank you for supporting this package for cancer research funding because I'm alive thanks to this. Like I
mhm,
wouldn't, or I'll say, like, and I'll be upfront with you, I started crying in the middle of like a senator's office because I've talked about my dad. Or
mhm,
we were there, I was there for an advocacy event the day after my birthday a few years ago. And no, it was actually the year I went through breast cancer treatment. That's right. A month after I finished treatment, I was there. It was the day after my birthday. And I was, asking my senator for support of it. And then I started getting all choked up because I was like,
mhm,
I just thank you. I'm like, if it was appropriate, I would hug you because you voted, to support this research. And I am a testament of why you need to continue funding it. And so I'm really excited that I was very proud that she did continue to fund it. She voted yes for all of
mhm,
that. But again, it just goes back to that. Like storytelling is so impactful of making it, personal, letting people find a connection with it. It doesn't have to be long, it doesn't have to be drawn out, but just finding that connection that makes people feel like, oh, wow, I see me, or I see my sister, or oh, I see, my neighbor in this.
mhm. So my next question actually has two parts to it.
Mhm.
So the first part is, what advice do you have for writers and creatives who may be facing challenges or seeking inspiration in their journey? And then also, if they are facing challenges, how do they create stories around that to advocate for themselves and other people?
Okay, so the first one, can you repeat the first one?
Yeah.
Sorry.
So, what would you say to someone who's a creative who's going through something? How will they have the resilience that you had in your journey? Like, what advice would you have for them?
Okay. So sometimes, I mean, sometimes when you're going through like all these challenges, it might cause writer's block. Like I've been there.
Mhm,
One of the things that I really like to do is I journal. And I know some people when they hear journaling, they're like, I got, like this. But I believe journaling is whatever you make it. I call it journaling, but sometimes I will sit down and I will just write out a few sentences, or I like to end my day thinking about at least three things that I'm grateful for in the day.
mhm,
And that sometimes will spur me into, writing. Sometimes it might not even be that day, but then when I flip through and I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. And then I'll kind of be sitting there and I'm like, oh, that's actually a really good topic to talk about, or those. So I think it's even just breaking it down into like the most simplistic step, that when you're having writer's block, I mean, they oftentimes will say it, get up, move around. I'll be upfront, I bike a lot and I hike,
mhm,
and there are times when I usually try not to take technology with me when I'm on a hike or whatever, but I usually carry my phone. And there's times when I've been hiking by myself that I like will whip out the notes section and I'm like talking to it the whole time because I was like, oh my God, this is such a great idea,
mhm,
or it's like I haven't been able to write for the last week, but now all of a sudden I'm like, oh, oh, I got to do this, or but it never fails. Or what most people say, you're in the shower when you come up with those ideas. So it's just, I just kind of find, you'll see, I have notebooks like I just said to somebody the other day, I'm like, I think I have 14 notebooks around my house. I gotta condense things because it's just that. So those are some ways that like I will, if I'm having writer's block, and sometimes it's like I'm trying to write a blog on a certain topic and I'm just stuck. And what I
Mhm.
find then is if I'm just like, okay, I'm not writing on that topic right now, suddenly another topic will just flow right out of me. And then maybe the next day, all of a sudden, I'm like, oh, now I can write that blog because I just thought, I've done it. It's probably not like the most efficient way of writing, but I've done it at times where I literally am kind of like writing two different blogs at the same time, just because it's like
Mhm.
I start writing and then I'm like, oh, that's a good idea for this blog too. So I'll kind of push it back over there.
Yeah, and then the second part is, when you're overcoming those challenges, how do you write about overcoming them in a way that empowers yourself and other people? And how do you get the energy to talk about heavy topics and to
Mhm.
still have it be something that feels light if it does?
Yeah. Well, some of it is that, it's really focusing on that, I guess, choosing ease, right? So
Mhm.
sometimes when I've been feeling really heavy about something or something's really just stressing me out, I won't write about it just
Mhm.
because I feel like I don't know what that's really going to come. Or, um, it's like I can't find anything positive in this topic. And not that you
Mhm.
always have to find something positive, but for me, like with my blog topics, it's like I talk about like a heavy topic, but then I'll try to find and some sort of angle or advice or like a mindset to help people overcome it. And
Mhm.
so I but other times it's something that I feel really passionate about sharing with people. And so I think it comes back to that passion of wanting to be able to help other people too.
Mhm.
And I know that sometimes things are scary to put out in the world, talking about I wrote a blog post a couple months ago about menopause. Like nobody wants to talk about menopause. And, I'm in my 40s going through menopause, but thanks to breast cancer. But what I realized is that people don't want to talk about menopause, but women are going through it, like
Mhm.
because of a cancer or another health issue or whatever. And I started thinking about, I'm like, oh, what kind of advocate am I if I'm not willing to, get it out there? And
Mhm.
it made me feel better though. Once I started writing about it, and then when I posted it, the number of women that I had responding who were like, thank you for saying this. Thank you for putting it out there. Thank you for
Mhm.
bringing this topic. And then the cool thing was I even had some of my male readers message me saying, oh, wow, like this is really, I shared this with my wife or I shared this with my sister. And
Mhm.
they're like, I really appreciate that you put it out there. So I think it's sometimes just coming back to that. What's your reason? Why are you sharing it? What is your purpose with it? That helps me be able to look at it from a different perspective. And it makes it not be so heavy when I'm thinking about the fact that, okay, like even when I was shared that I wrote a blog about grief and about my dad's death. And it kind of, even though I was crying when I was writing it, I mean, in some ways it was also, tears of, I was sharing memories of him. And so it
Mhm.
was tears of, some happiness too. But it was important to me and it lightened up for me as I was writing it because I wanted to let other people realize or know, remind them that they're not there alone. They're not going through this. And that's just part of my commitment and passion of, being an advocate to others.
Yeah, I love that. It reminds me of this saying, speak from your scars and not your wounds. And this idea that sometimes we do need to heal things or work through them before we can share them or give insight or teach lessons on them. But I'd love to just wrap this up with the question of what are you working on now and what are your upcoming projects that you'd like to share with the audience?
Sure. I'm working on too much. No, I'm just kidding. Always something, as we're similar people. Your brain's always popping. No, I'm really excited. This year, I'm really focusing on expanding my marketing and PR business. I want to
Mm.
be able to help. I work a lot with small businesses, and I want to be able to help them continue to grow and use their voice, and also expand out to be working with individuals on, really honing in on your personal brand and how you can bring your mindset and use your
Mm.
voice to be the person that you want to be. Like, step out of that shell, step out of that shadow, and really step into that light and that sunshine to, what's your purpose, what's your passion, and how do you embrace it. And that goes down to, I'm doing a bunch of workshops on self-advocacy and managing your mindset. And I'm really excited. I think it's going to be, like I said, my word of the year is abundance. And I'm excited to really share an abundance of just resources and really help people to just make the world a better place for themselves and for others.
That's amazing. I'm so glad that you're doing that work. Thank you for coming on today.
Thank you. This was so much fun, and I really appreciate it. I appreciate sharing all this and having the awesome conversation.
Thank you.